There you go. Oh.
Let's take another breath. Let's take one more. How good it is, how sweet it is to center down, to come together in fellowship and community, with a vision of a brave new world,
Yes.
fair and just and free. A human presence on the planet that is beneficial, practices and protocols that are sustainable. We come here to cultivate our hearts and our minds, to develop the deep intent to bring forth the beloved community. And we say thank you. We are truly here for such a time as this. So in this moment right now, we choose to rise above fear, to rise above divisiveness and otherness. We come here to cultivate the space within our hearts for the oneness. We come here to retrofit our foundations, to tend to our roots, so that the fruit may blossom and be ever so sweet. Thank you, thank you, thank you, sweet Holy Spirit, for having brought us from such a mighty, long way.
Yeah. Thank you.
We bless everything that transpires here, naming it as good and very, very good. We get out of the way, we allow it to be, and so it is. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Can you close those, please? Well, good evening. Good morning. Good morning. Good day.
Good morning.
Wherever you are, and whatever time this is that you are watching this. I am pleased to report that we now have a YouTube channel, the Rev Deborah Johnson, for such a time as this, where you can access the archives. I believe that they're all there now, or nearly all. May not be in chronological order, but you can tell by the dates. And I highly, 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 highly recommend that you go back, review, and pass some of these on. I'm even going to send an invitation out to any brave, bold souls who just seem to have nothing to do with your time, to go through some of these and maybe mark what some of the like good little sections are that we might be able to spin off and put on YouTube, you know, like a 5-minute clip, 10-minute clip here on different subject matters. I think the nation can really use some of that right now at this point in time. So that being said, we're here. And it's a week away from our 2016 national elections.
Yikes.
I know you meant yay.
Yay.
I'm sure that's what you actually meant. We've been gone for a couple of weeks, and it is, in fact, good to be back. So today we're going to try to tie some of the things together that we have been talking about and move the discussion on more specifically onto economic issues, but seeing how all of that connects to some of the things that we've already been learning. Fun, yes? This is good. So I would like to have a couple of check-ins. Who do we have online with us now, Leah?
We have, I know we see Elizabeth.
Okay.
And then we have some phone numbers that I recognize today.
Okay.
And nobody else. So you'll have to announce yourselves. You'll want to *6 to unmute yourself if you're on the phone.
Okay.
*6.
So I'll take 2 people who are here in person. Give us a reason why you are absolutely grateful to be in such a time as this for the work that we are doing. 2 people here, and then we'll take some folks who are with us on Zoom and open it up to the telephone participants as well. So who would like to give us a reason why you are absolutely grateful to be here for such a time as this, doing this work on oneness? Okay.
Because the United States is such a wonderful experiment, and it has been a wonderful experiment for a long time, but we have the capacity to continue to experiment and continue to change and to continue to expand the beloved community beyond people who are just like us, but to all of humanity. And this ability to change and be flexible, I am so grateful for, so grateful for.
Yes. And your name?
Kaylee, sorry.
Okay. Anybody else? Why you're here for such a time as this? Yes, Margot.
I am here because I haven't been aware of what's going on most of my life. Just been living it, not knowing what in the world is happening. And now I know, and I can see clearly, and I am privileged to be in this environment, and privileged to see where things have been going, the possibility of change, and putting it into the atmosphere so that it can happen, and be part of it this time.
Great.
Be part of it.
Good. Thank you. And your name?
Margot.
Okay. So let's turn now to some of our Zoom participants. One of you, let us know why you are here and glad to be doing this work at this great moment in time.
Unmute yourself.
This is Ade.
There you go.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
that's okay.
Yes, I am. Well, it's nice to be back in the circle to hear each other's voices. So thank you for this space. I am so grateful because I can really say that I don't know a better time in the course of my life and my spiritual journey where there's the perfect opportunity to demonstrate truth, to live it, to teach it, to learn and grow together. So for me, I'm like an excited mad scientist and looking at what we're going to create together. So I'm just like in my lab, holding my hands together like, oh, this is going to be good. That's why I'm grateful.
I love it. I love it. This is good. Elizabeth, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I did come exactly to it. Someone's phone is ringing. What am I grateful for? I am so grateful to actually be living in this time.
Whoever's phone that is, can you mute it?
Thank you. What did I say? So I'm so grateful that I'm living in this time because we are, more and more of us are actually stepping up and making the world a better place and a place that works for everyone. Yeah. So we are increasing the consciousness. We are evolving the consciousness. And that is exciting. And I'm kind of feel honored that I get to be in on this. It's amazing.
Very good. Somebody on the phone? *6.
Yes, Rev Deborah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Paul Witt on the 9814941 number.
Okay, great. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. And as I've listened to you over the past couple of weeks, I've usually been in a situation where I just had to put you in my pocket because I was in a highly sensitive area. But what I got in touch with was what I'm really grateful for. I think all my life I've been waiting to get to this point. Am I willing to not be angry? Am I willing to be pissed off and mad, but am I willing not to be angry? And I've learned how to differentiate between the two. And I listen to Jason Mitchell every morning on his daily prayer call, and just going deep, as it feels like people that are coming to me are going through a lot of angst and a lot of confusion and all this. And I said, that's all an illusion out there. The only sense that I have is a direct route to my heart, and then going deeper into my soul. And I've never been there before. So thank you for that. And I know that Lucy is in your class on Tuesdays, and she doesn't share any confidential information, but we're so in alignment with each other on this. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I really, 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 really appreciate those comments, and welcome.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So everybody is going to get a copy of, you can just give this to people now so I don't forget, because I got a lot of different things here. What I try to do is to give you some websites to take a look at, things that might encourage you to do some research on your own. Some of these things we will pull up for a look with each other. But one of the things that I'd like us to cover now is things about our economic system. There's a lot of talk now, particularly with the elections, about, what are we going to do? There's a deficit. How do we stimulate growth? What happens? There are different theories that are being put out by the Democrats, that are theories that are different being put out by the Republicans about what is it that you really need to do and how does it happen. And all of that can sound really confusing. And the way that it's presented, none of it will really get us to the place of oneness. So I want to unpack some of this and to connect it to some of the things that we've already been talking about, because it's all coming out of the same consciousness. And I think it is so, so important for us to understand this, because if we do not understand the consciousness out of which the things are coming, then we're just like pruning the tree. I remember the house that I lived in not too long ago had this beautiful wisteria plant and this beautiful bougainvillea. And it just would hurt me to my heart when they would prune that bougainvillea, because when they would prune it, that thing looked dead. I mean, there was nothing. They just took off everything. But when it would bloom, guess what? It would look exactly the way that it had looked before. And what we're doing is we just keep pruning. We're cutting things back, but expecting another tree, expecting another flower, and we just keep getting the same flower back because we haven't really understood where it is that we've been coming from. Another one of the things that's really up for grabs right now with this election coming up is who gets to decide and who gets to appoint the next Supreme Court judges. Now, I'm not sure exactly how it is in other nations, but in the United States, we have a provision that I think we need to relook at, particularly as people live longer and longer lives. Really, I mean, when you think about the life expectancy when we first created this, 65 years, 70 max, now people are doing 90, 95. A Supreme Court justice serves until they die. Until they die. And you only have 9 people total. So we know that we have one seat because that seat is being refused to be filled by the present Congress. There could be as many as 2 seats, maybe 3 seats over the next several years. Chances are whoever gets in the court will probably be 40-ish, 50-ish, which means they could be serving for the next 40 to 50 years. Just let that sink in. We're at 2016. Whoever's appointed now could still be a judge in 2056 and 2066. There's a lot at stake. And if there's no more reason to vote than that, and particularly a lot of talk about turning back the clock, about reversing decisions that have already been made. And particularly this notion about wanting to have constitutional judges that will in fact uphold the Constitution of the original founding fathers. You've heard this language. Yes. This notion that now in the courts we have quote unquote activist judges that somehow are judges that are taking matters into their own hands and steering society in a way other than what the original founding fathers had wanted it to go. So I want to go back to what was this original stuff and tie it in with where we are and how all of this is playing out on our economic front. So there is a website I'd like for you to pull up.
This one?
Yes, let's pull up this one. Actually, go on and pass that out.
Which one?
But for purposes of viewing, it might be better to pull up the...
This is that one.
Yeah, I know. It might be better to pull up the first one.
The interactive constitution.
Yeah, I think it'll just be easier to see.
That? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to go all the way back for a moment. The U.S. Constitution to the very first article. So we're talking like in the beginning, Genesis. We're talking Article 1, Section 2. You can't get too much more in the beginning of the founding fathers of the Constitution than Article 1, Section 2. Can you show Section 2 on there? Pull it up.
Yeah.
Okay. It's in, yeah, it's in, and the yellow was already there. I did not mark it in the yellow. Now, for those of you who just passed this, whom I just passed this out to, you have the same thing that's over on a side box on the right. But can you pull up the Section 2? Okay.
Just a clarification, are you saying that these folks want to change everything back to the original, get rid of all the amendments and everything?
They don't necessarily want to get rid of everything, but there are a number of decisions, like the Republicans want to reverse Roe v. Wade, which is the amendment that allows for there to be abortion. The Democrats want to reverse Citizens United, which is one of the recent decisions that gives corporations personhood and gives them unlimited access to political engagement. The Republicans want to undo marriage equality and the Voting Rights Acts. I mean, there's any number of things that each group has pledged, so to speak, that they will go back in and, in fact, undo. But more than undo, the question becomes interpretation of what is right action. And for cases coming up in the future, how will we rule? Will we rule according to what we think of is sort of the highest and the best of the beloved community, kind of the spirit of what we believe our democracy stands for, or literally the precedent, literally the past interpretations of what, quote unquote, the founding fathers meant? See, this is not splitting hairs. This notion of what is the responsibility is the responsibility to keep intact the original intent of the original people who founded the nation. Or are we to live by some place of higher morals where the Constitution is a living, breathing document that keeps getting changed and amended and growing with the world as we see that there's need to expand or to grow? And some saying that expansion has taken us off from our original purpose and our original intent, and that we need to go back to what our quote unquote original intent was. Part of the reason why I think the fallacy of that argument flies so much is that so few people actually know the original intent. That so few people actually understand what the original documents have said. So, if we look at this Article 1, Section 2, okay, it's that part that's in yellow there for those of you who are on the screen. Okay. This is where they are trying to come up with the House representatives and who gets to represent and how is that going to be done. Representatives, and this is quoting, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined. So now this is how they are going to determine how many representatives people get. This is how they basically are going to determine, for all intent and purposes, the census. Like who in fact is to be counted, to be represented, and or taxed. Determined by adding to the whole number of free persons. Okay, so it's a formula. You start with everybody who's free. They are the base. Okay? And then you add to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years. So what was happening is that certain white people were already free, And for the purposes of the census and taxation, you could also include the white people who were what was referred to as indentured servants. They were not free. However, their servitude had a maximum number of years, and 7 years was a typical maximum amount of servitude. Okay. Now, I want to tie this for a moment with some of the things that we had been talking about Jim Crow. The ones who were in servitude quite often were the Irish in particular. They were always subclassed to the English. The Italians, the Germans, such that they were always kept a few rungs lower and poor. So that when the slaves were freed, there was a lot of fear that these people who used to be indentured servants would hook up with the freed slaves, because they were the workers. These were the ones who knew how to run everything and to do everything because they were the workers. Are you with me? So this Jim Crow stuff was to separate out the newly freed from the more recently freed white indentured servants who were poor, to make sure they didn't get together. Are you with me? And take over. Okay. So the formula started with free people, then those who were bound to service for a term of years, excluded Indians, it says. Everything about this nation has always been racialized. From Article 1, excluded the Indians, which is really important. The native people were never citizens, were never going to be considered citizens. They were not included as people in any way, shape, or form to get any kind of representation. And this is way before reservations. Any kind of representation, whatsoever, or taxation. Okay, so this is really colonialistic. We are setting up on these other people's lands. They don't even exist in our, they don't even exist in our system. There is no provision to include them, to involve them, for them to be a part of our world or our nation by any stretch of the imagination.
On their land.
Yeah, on their land.
Operation on their
Yes. So there's 0 in terms of the census count. The free white people, the indentured servants are 1. Native Americans are 0. And 3/5 of all other persons, which meant the slaves. The slaves were the ones that were not free. They weren't going to be free in a number of years, and they were not amongst the native population.
Is there like other times, or is this just when it started, that people started being counted as not whole people?
Well, but see, we shouldn't, don't go there.
Okay, that wasn't sure.
Yeah, don't go there. And which is why I gave you this particular one, because it makes it seem, if you look at the, and I know those of you who have and on the screen don't have this. But this is why I gave a handout to those of you who are in the room, so that you can see that this really wasn't so much about one's humanity or not. And I actually do appreciate the fact that they were referred to as persons, really, because that kind of dispels this whole myth, like they didn't know that these people who weren't free were actually people. No, they were in fact persons. This is about a proportionment. So on the paragraph on the other side, some of the stuff is deep there, but just in the middle there, it says the Constitution that the delegates proposed included several provisions that explicitly recognized and protected slavery. Without these provisions, Southern delegates would not support the new Constitution. And without the Southern states on board, the Constitution had no chance to be ratified. Provisions allowed Southern states to count slaves as 3/5 persons for purposes of apportionment in Congress, even though the slaves could not, of course, vote. Okay. So what it was doing basically is saying, giving the South power. Their white numbers were small. See? So if they only got representatives based upon the white people, then they were always going to be less influential than the North. Okay? So the apportionment of the 3/5 was to allow them to have more representatives in the House.
Which gave them more benefit for having more slaves.
Exactly.
God.
So they had more benefit for being more slaves. And unlike the North, where the people voted and the representatives were representing voting constituents, they got extra representatives for people who didn't vote. Okay, can you feel this legacy that's still going on now? That we have the representatives based upon the population, but a population that doesn't vote and has no power and has no say. Can you?
But their numbers are being used.
Of course. Yeah. But what I'm saying is
they
it's still
have freed slaves, or they're getting more representatives, even though those people that are being counted don't vote.
Well, yes. Or circa Mississippi, 1960.
Right.
There's no difference. There's absolutely no difference. Is that you still have all these representatives who are based upon this population, but you prohibit those individuals from participating in the political system.
So the white people from that state have more power because they're representative. They have more representatives. They vote.
Exactly.
Right.
But if you look at now, how they changed the voting, if you look at now how they changed the voting territory in Mississippi, the little Marion where I'm coming from, it was more black in Marion County than it was in say Waldo County. So what they did, they split it that they vote this vote right, they split it them in half. Where their vote don't so much count now, because when they went to Hattiesburg, that's when they had such a big thing in Hattiesburg about how they voted last year. They have it this year too, but they're a little bit ahead of them this time. That's meaning Mississippi is a whole lot different ball game. And that's what they did. They found out the black was in one county that could throw the election when they had that governor election. They had one black man in Hattiesburg that had won that thing. They switched the voting thing. They switched it on purpose.
Right.
So
after people were allowed to vote, then there were a lot of these kinds of efforts that we were talking about to try to break up the voting blocks. Segregation then worked against them because you had these high concentrations of racial pockets who could then swing the vote one way or another. So there's a process, it's called gerrymandering, where you go in and you redline and you cut up the districts to make sure that you don't have these big voting blocks, okay? But yes, divide and conquer. And I haven't even gotten to the economics yet. I'm just trying to, but you are connecting the dots here to see how these systemic issues are still playing out today around representation and who gets to be where and the votes and whether they count or not. Kaylee, and then I'm going to see if anybody.
If we go back to 1776 and people who have representation but couldn't vote, what about women? Represented,
Yes.
taxed,
Yes.
and had no say over who the representation would be or what the tax would be.
Yes.
I knew both of my grandmothers really, really well. And when they were young women, they could not vote.
Yes.
So it's well within my lifetime that women had no say over the representation and no say over any of the policies that would affect their lives.
Yes.
You can tell this really pisses me off.
No, it's true.
It pisses me off.
It's true. And it's part of the reason why I gave you this handout, to show you that progression and to show you when you're supposed to go. Oh yeah. There's no question about it. Yes. Women were also chattel. Okay. Women were also property. And all of this stuff is over property.
Women and children.
Yes, women and children, just like the slaves, they were property. So before I go on, is there anybody on Zoom or telephone that is lost, or can I go on here? Because I'm about to build on this. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you. Everybody good?
This is Marguerite. This is Marguerite, and I just want to say that it's been very clear, even without being able to see. I really appreciate the clarity of understanding this. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And it is a misunderstanding. And to be honest, even a misunderstanding that I held about this notion of Black people being 3/5 of a person. That it really wasn't about 3/5 of a person in humanity. It was solely about this apportionment, okay? However, as we have seen, and part of the reason why I gave you this handout, and those of you who are on the phone, you'll get all these links, so you can have these same handouts. They're taken from the web. There was no intention of a lot of these people ever becoming citizens, including the Native Americans. You know, as well as people of African descent, which is dangerous to me when we use this language about wanting to make certain that we interpret the Constitution as the original founders had written it, when we have seen by cases like the Dred Scott decision that we went through, 400-something pages in 1857, where they go through every federal law, they go through all the state's laws, and said it is clear that it was never the intent for anybody of African descent to ever be a citizen, and that even include the freed people, because they weren't allowed things like passports and you know, and that kind of thing. And this isn't to like quote unquote beat the dead horse. It's to say we have to step up with an intent that has never existed before. It is not going to happen unless we come up with that intent, unless we emphatically say we want a constitution that is for everybody. See, so we've been doing, as Kaylee mentioned here, this incremental expansion. And even the way that we organize politically, it is still this incremental expansion, working in these individual silos. So this week, we're going to talk about the immigrants, and this week it's going to be women, and this week, okay, it's about Muslims and religion, and this week it's about marriage equality and the LGBT community. But there's not like one massive push, right, as there was theoretically in the beginning, to say all people are created equal and endowed by their creator. It's like those words were written, but we never stood in that. And I think that's the oneness movement that we're being called to now. Not that I have anything against movements or different groups, fighting and whatnot to get their rights, but it becomes like musical chairs where everybody's just trying to make sure that they've got a seat at the table, and we're doing this incremental expansion as opposed to saying, no, we're going to start with a new fundamental premise of all people, and really mean all people this time go round. Yes, yes, and literally mean all people. It's like that's this new place of oneness that we're needing to go to and to start. Okay, you with me? Okay. So, take a breath. Anybody on the line or telephone that needs to chime in here before I start taking this more directly into economics?
I may be stunned at this point, in shock. It feels as if, and pardon me here, it's almost a little bit more to this, because if you have those words that all are created equal, it sounds good. I mean, it sounds pretty, and a lot of people keep going back to that and saying that, because as a country, boy, that sounds good. And a lot of people have been bamboozled by those words. It's almost as if to have this intent to move forward, we're going to have to undo an awful lot.
Yes, exactly. There's no question about it. Yes, there is a lot that we have to undo. Remember, the isms have two components. There's an attitudinal component, but there is a structural component. And we make the mistake of thinking that just because we've gotten rid of the attitudinal component, or we're working on that something's actually going to change. But it's not going to change unless we work on the structural pieces as well. If you take something, for example, like Barack Obama, okay? Most people are aware of the fact that Barack Obama is the first African-American president of the United States, yes? Okay. But few people know that Barack Obama was only the third African-American senator since Reconstruction. Since the 1800s. The third Black senator since Reconstruction. Now let that sit in a minute. I am talking about deep, deep systemic. And yes, it does mean change. And that's this battle that we're in now. So you have something like marriage equality. Oh, baby, that's systemic change. That's really big systemic change. And that's where the battles come in now, is to say whether this change is right, wrong, appropriate, not appropriate. But when you say justice and equality for all, that does mean all, and it means giving up some of the privileges that you have had when your position or your group, your mores, your values have been the one to dominate.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you mean by systemic change? Systemic, I'm not clear on that word.
Systemic is a system. When there is systemic change, you go through and you make certain that the dots connect. When you have systemic change, you are going through and you are shifting the obstacles, the barriers, you're rewriting, you are reorganizing so that the change can be sustainable. But if you don't do it in a systemic way, then it's just hit or miss. Some people make it through the cracks, but the way that things are set up, it's still going to be the stumbling block for the next ones. It's like the difference between being a pioneer and a token. It's a very thin line. Very. And in the moment you do not know which you are. When you are the first, you don't know if you are just a token or a pioneer. The difference is what happens behind you. That's the difference. What happens behind you. And as a nation, we haven't wanted to do systemic change. We've been wanting to have tokens like a Barack Obama become president. And we had all that talk 8 years ago. Woo, we're now post-racist. Because we've elected an African-American president. Oh, isn't this proof we're not racist anymore? I don't hear anybody saying that now, 8 years later. I don't hear that now. Because people are realizing that one person through a glass ceiling doesn't systemically change everything. Okay? Now, systemic change doesn't necessarily have to be positive. Systemic change doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's going towards justice or equality. Put up the last one, please.
The same one?
No, the very last one. So I realized I didn't do a print out of that. So we have heard, yes. So we have heard at different times people say that we fought the Civil War over slavery. Yes?
Yes.
And one would think that that meant, and the way that we try to portray it, is that we fought the Civil War as a moral issue to end slavery. Yes?
Yes.
That is not true. We did fight the Civil War over slavery, kind of indirectly, but it was over the expansion of slavery, not any moral thing to end slavery. It isn't like the North came in and said, oh, we're just so tired of you Southerners having all these slaves that they need to be freed, and we're going to come in here and free the slaves. No, no. the South was trying to succeed. The South was trying to split off and build its own nation, and then going after the rest of the territory of the United States to try to expand slavery into these other areas so that they could become even bigger feudal lords. So the Civil War was fought from the North side to not lose the power of the South, because the South was the economic hub. The North is shipping. They have the garment districts and the mercantile and all of the rest of that, but the cotton and the tobacco and everything is coming from the South. Okay? The North would be nothing without the South. So they could not afford to have the Southern states succeed, to break off and to form their own nation, because they would have been bled to death. And the European nations, particularly France and Germany, were ready to recognize the South as an independent nation and to do trade directly with them, because the South was going to cut them better deals than what the US government was cutting them in terms of import-export tax and tariffs and trades and all the rest of that. So these discussions that we're having now about trade, it is as old as this nation. We have been doing these same discussions about taxation, about taking the jobs elsewhere. So what we now think of as outsourcing or taking the jobs to other countries, that's what they were doing by trying to take the jobs into other territories. It was the exact equivalent of like shipping it overseas. You know, we can't expand into New York, we can't expand into New Jersey, we can't expand into Connecticut, but there's all this other territory over here that we might be able to expand into. But if they were successful in expanding into that other territory, that's going to leave the North out. It's not fair. It's not a balance in terms of the economy. Are you with me? Yes. It's not a balance. So yes, it was fought over that, but not for that reason. So in terms of economics, here's what they tried to do. I'm having a hard time reading. I think we can't get that any clearer, can we? Okay. All right. So we created this thing called the Homestead Act. And what the Homestead Act did is it basically took the land away from the Native Americans and redistributed it. What is the figure there? 200 and I can't see.
270 million acres.
Yes.
A lot of land.
So 270 million acres were given to white settlers. So here's the way that it went. All this open territory, a lot of them were not states yet. But in order to become a state, you had to have so many white people in there for your census count. Back to Article 2 again. The native populations didn't count. And you couldn't have the slaves without the slave owners, so you needed to get the white people there. But listen to how they did the census. it wouldn't have taken that many white people if the slaves could also be counted. Are you with me? So if you wanted to open up into a new territory, let's just say, I don't know what it was. Let's just say you had to have 5,000 people in order, that territory, in order for it to become a state. If it was going to be a free state, you'd have to have 5,000 white people. But in order to be a slave state, you only had to have maybe 1,000 or 2,000 white people with all of their slaves. Okay, are you with me?
Free African American.
Not free, they're slaves.
There was no free.
No, there were free, but they were not counting.
They weren't counted.
No, they're not counted. Even though they were encouraged to come, they were not counted in terms of this. And the free blacks never got any of this land. Ever. Not only did they not get any of the homesteaded land, but the land that they were promised to them as free slaves, the 40 acres and a mule, which is still a joke amongst black people. They never got that either. Okay? So picture this now. This is the manifest destiny push west. So the US government is trying to expand the US territory. They're trying to get people to come west so they can establish more and more states, but you can't establish the states unless the white people are there. So the incentive to get the white people there is to give them land. They could squat. All they had to do was go into the territory and work the land. Just sit on it, work, and we will give it to you. This is the biggest government handout. This makes welfare seem like chump change in how few decades it took to basically, you really think about this. We came here, and from sea to shining sea, there were thousands of tribes that lived here in the mountains and plains and the seas and the deserts and all of the rest of it. Tribes that didn't know each other. The tribes that had a cosmology of the world that was so consistent with their attunement and their oneness with nature, they did not leave traces of themselves behind. They did not leave behind cities and economic debris. So it gave the illusion to these white settlers that this is virgin land, like unclaimed.
If they discovered it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Uninhabited territory. I mean, it boggles the mind when you really think of it. There's been nothing like this in human history. Nothing like this. Nothing. Where a superpower like this, and we're a baby nation, we're not that old, came in and within a few decades just took over a whole continent. 3,000 miles. Most countries aren't that big. 3,000 miles from coast to coast, and redistributed the land. So moral judgment aside, we're in the same argument now. The same argument. The Republicans are talking about what we call trickle-down economic theory, which basically says, put the money and the resources and the wealth in the hands of rich people. Because it doesn't matter how much money they have, they're going to always want more. No, but this is the thought. Put the money in the hands of rich people because they have an insatiable appetite for more and will always work in their own self-interest. Like everybody is going to do that, but that if you give it to them, they're going to take this money and try to make more money for themselves. And in the making of more money for themselves, they're going to create jobs and they're going to create opportunities that's going to make the economy grow. Okay, so don't saddle them. It's trickled down that the Confederacy was trying to do back then, which wound up causing the Civil War. They were, we don't need all this taxation. You are strangling us. We're rich. Leave us alone. We'll wind up making you more money in the North. Just let us do our thing. We're going to go into these territories. This is our new outsourcing. It's not overseas, but it's in these new territories. We're going to take our cheap, no paying labor with us, create the stuff that we need to create, ship it overseas, ship it to the North, and all will be well. We're going to actually increase the economy like this. Are you with me? You have the Democrats, on the other hand, that are saying, no, trickle down doesn't work. You need to put the money in the hands of the people. You need to put the money in the hands of the middle class. You need to put the money in the hands of the ones like closer to their labor so that they can enjoy the fruits of their work. Hence, the land apportionment. Let's take the resources, let's take the land and put it in the hands of the people. When you look at economics as a pie, it's always a question of distribution. It becomes a question of who do you take from and give to in this pie. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So we've been doing this dance. We have been doing this dance for a very, very long time. The idea now is Democrats put forth, tax the rich. Or not just tax them, take away the loopholes that enable them to not pay taxes. Right. So it isn't even tax them, but just get the taxes that refuse to pay. Yes. Or not refuse to, but don't have to pay. Right. Yeah. Whether it's the businesses or whatever, we take that and redistribute it. It's very, very similar in terms of the kind of overall logic that's happening here. So they went about the business with all this land apportionment of trying to create a middle class, of trying to stop the rise of these feudal lords feeling like, well, we already did that when we moved from England. And here we're now back in the South and we're creating the same, dynamic again. Let's stop them and put the wealth in the hands of the people. Now, the fact that we stole the land, 270 million acres. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of land. So when you fast forward this and you look at all of the systemic change now, it's like, how do you even get in the game? Real estate is one of the ways you get into the game. Real estate is one of the ways you get into the game. Okay? So when you hear a lot of the crying about the unfairness, or people trying to find ways to get into the game, and I'm not saying this judgmentally, I'm saying this from a historic fact. It's like white America refuses to acknowledge the fact that they were given an upper hand, that this so-called white middle class that we have didn't like the bootstraps and, make it on your own and like all the rest of that. Is that no, that is not what happened. The government gave you a handout. It's like the government gave you a leg up. But now if we hear anything about the government assuming some responsibility to try to help give people something to stand on and to get into the game, we cry foul play. We cry foul play. When everything from Social Security to Medicare to Medicaid to all these things were these social safety networks, and for all intent and purposes, a form of socialism. If you really wanna like get down to it, that 270 million acres, that was not capitalism at work. That was socialism. That was a social redistribution, like of the wealth. So we have this interesting kind of situation where we have a view of our minds of how capitalistic we've been and independent and rugged and everybody making it on their own might and us having this just and fair society, when that's not the history and that's not how it's happened. I want to say one more thing and then we'll open it up for some questions before we bring this one to a close. Hope I'm not jumping around here too much because I'm trying to connect a lot of dots. I hope I haven't lost it too much. This notion about undocumented workers and them being a drain on the economy, wanting to build a wall in Mexico, wanting to deport and send these undocumented workers back. The key word in that phrase is workers, not undocumented. The key word in that phrase is workers. These people are working. They are working. They have jobs. And it's not unlike when you hear one of the candidates saying that he took advantage of the tax loopholes that were there. Like, don't blame him for taking advantage of them when they were there. To a certain extent, the undocumented worker is saying the same thing. Why are you blaming us for taking 11 million jobs
that we didn't want?
That were there?
That nobody else wanted.
Yeah, that were there. Okay? 11 that were there. our economy from the earliest days of slavery and indentured servants, not just the black people, but enslaving the white people. Our earliest days have been built on an economy that always had an underclass of free or low-wage labor. Always. Always. And that which we cannot do here, we export. Now, we paid attention when we were looking at the 13th Amendment, where we were paying attention to the fact that it said that no one should be forced into servitude except for criminal purposes. Remember that? But it also said that would not happen within U.S. jurisdiction. It wouldn't happen within U.S. jurisdiction. It was not a manifesto against slavery. Like in the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, we declare, God has created us all equal with inalienable rights, but we have never done that. So it didn't put any prohibition against American companies. That's what I'm saying. Against American companies doing whatever they do in other countries, in other jurisdictions. Hence this battle over this territory, this open territory, and like who's going to own it and who's going to claim it. If we were to somehow manage to deport these 11 million undocumented workers, guess what would happen? Our economy would collapse. There's no question about it. It would just collapse.
And who's going to be taking advantage of the fact that the economy collapses?
Well, well, and even those classes of people are going to have a really hard time when they don't have any workers. Okay, so it's one of these things where, in the name of oneness, in the name of oneness, the demonization that we've been doing around undocumented workers as though they're the cause of, all these, rapists and all these, come on. They're working, they're paying taxes, they're contributing. And if we really say that we believe in family and family values, the last thing that we would do is go breaking up families, which we have been doing forever with our immigration laws, to begin with. Do we have problems? Yes, we have problems, but we don't need to scapegoat or blame anyone for these problems when our system is designed that way. It isn't like the undocumented workers came over here and created the jobs. These jobs and these positions were here. They were already here. I was watching something a couple of days ago and I just had to laugh. It was this speech to court the black vote and explaining how you don't have anything to lose by voting, like for voting for me and voting for, you don't have anything anyway. You don't have any jobs. really, I'm serious. Yeah, you don't have any jobs, and your neighborhoods are in shambles, and you don't have any education, and you don't have this, and you don't have, and nobody has been impacted more by illegal immigration and undocumented workers than the African American community. That's why you're in such impoverishment. You know, we're going to create new jobs. We're going to create jobs, and what the whole African American community was hearing, those illegal aliens came and took your job. You're the ones that should be washing the dishes and picking the cotton, and we're going to create jobs and get them out of here so you can have your jobs back that they have taken from you. And it's,
Oh my gosh.
but I mean, that's what it's saying. It's like that's what it's like. That's what it's saying.
And the sad thing about it is that a lot of the young black folks do not know what they are saying. That's the sad thing about this thing. It's the most saddest thing about this that we as the young black people do not know that code that they are saying.
Mm-hmm. And
unless you have somebody to sit down with these kids
and break it
and break that code.
So you've got this dilemma here. You want to get rid of all the undocumented workers, but yet you refuse to raise the minimum wage. Okay? Mm-hmm. This creates a dilemma, to say the least. Somewhere we have to start having some new conversations. Okay? Somewhere we have to start having some new conversations, because everybody's got to go through here. Everybody. The rich, the undocumented, we're all here. We're all playing our part. I think there's room enough for everybody in the world, for the Mexicans and the Muslims, and it's like everybody else. But we have to have the courage to envision a new world that really can work for everyone. It really can. But this stuff that we're doing in this dance, it is not new. We have been doing this dance. And I think the sooner that we can kind of recognize it, the government has always participated in the distribution of wealth and the redistribution of wealth and who has what and who's where. That we've always done some things to help us along.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like, we just have to have a vision that's big enough to pull us there. So are there any people, were there chats on there that we need to discuss?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's chats, but you kind of talked through them.
Okay, I was hoping that I would get. Are there any other questions that are there for those of you who are Zooming or on the telephone? Okay. And although I'm talking about this in the context of the U.S., this isn't just a U.S. issue. It's the same. It's the same all over the world. This is just a stage for discussion. Yes.
This is Marguerite.
Yes.
And in terms of needing to have this conversation, the kind that we're having in for a time is now, are we going to be talking about what we can do, or are you kind of saying we just need to become more informed and articulate in terms of expressing our understanding of it?
Let's tackle that some the next couple of sessions about where it is that we go from here. What I've been trying to do more than anything is develop amongst some people an understanding that's deep enough to be able to begin the conversations.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like pre-training.
Yeah.
It's like pre-training for engagement.
Yeah. If you don't have this understanding, you can't have a conversation.
Yes. Yes. So, and I'm really hoping that the people who have been doing this want to continue on. I would like to start opening this up for dialogue amongst each other where, I can just kind of chime in as a guide or, answer some questions or whatnot. But I wanted us to have enough background and to see how these dots connect. And I hope nobody feels overwhelmed by it. I think there's something liberating when you pull the curtain back and see there's no Oz, there's no wizard back there. It makes you take your power back. And we've been acting disempowered way too long. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that.
Anybody?
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Kaylee?
I'd like to say something based on what Marguerite said. When we did the Ideathon, this was about a month ago, and we've got a whole bunch of invite people together to talk about the next 20 years. When you did the focus group, the big learning for me was the common existential question is, what can I do?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's such an important question, and we have to start answering that question.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What can I do?
Ade says, all I can say is this is mind-blowing. So yes, we need a new conversation.
Good.
I had a young man speak to me on that language Friday,
Mm-hmm.
that tired of this system, what can we do to take the country back to the right direction like it should?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, you need to join us in some discussion about this,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want it to stop here for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let it to stop here.
Yes.
I want to do there for real learning in this section I have for myself.
Yes.
That I have power, that I can go out and explain to others and try to get us in the right direction, that everybody's on the same page of wanting to help take our power back, that we can do something as a whole, not as a destruction way, but as a justice way in the right direction.
Yes. Yes. I agree. I agree. Yeah. And I think part of the challenge that we're having now, and it's also part of the benefit, is that we have a new kind of two Americas.
Yes.
We have a historical America, and then we have like a post-World War II America, where we have all these immigrants and people who are here as first, second generation, maybe as early as third, who have no sense of the country's history, who feel disconnected to it, not responsible for it in any kind of way.
But they've been sold a bill of goods.
Well, yeah, but that's part of it.
Right.
That's part of the good news about it, though, is that that's why there has been so much change, is because we have so many people who don't have any skin in the game. Whether you like it or not, I'm watching those Southern governors and the Confederate flags coming down. And consistently, there have been people who are second generation immigrants or whatnot, and they just don't have a sense of what that flag means to the rest of the constituency base. But I do still think we need to have some empathy and compassion there, regardless. So we've come down to the end of this time. It was a couple of weeks, and I was trying to squish a lot in there because the elections are so close. Monday, we will meet up again. Yes, and vote. Polls are open at your, wherever you are, at your local election offices. In most places around the country, those offices will be open on the weekend as well. If you're going to do vote by mail, you got to send that in like by today, by most places, if you want to be able to do that. And I really would encourage everybody, vote. Did I say vote?
Vote. And
Vote.
if you got your ballot in the mail, keep it and take it with you.
Yeah. I usually do it ahead of time and then just take it with me. All right, let's stand.
Great to be back.
Let's stand. Thank you for the contributions. And for all of you who've been making contributions via PayPal online, thank you for that as well. What are we going to give ourselves permission to do? Woo! Be all we can be. Yes?
Yes.
I give myself permission. All I can be. I give myself permission. With passion and free. I give myself permission to be all I can be. I give myself permission to live passionate and free.
Thank you.
Consciousness and multiply. All right. Be sure to check out those links on that handout. I think you'll find it interesting.
Love you guys.
And there's a particular section there about trickle down economics, lots of graphs and statistics about why it works and doesn't work.
I already am. You are enough positive. I don't know what I was saying. It's just like. I laugh because you reminds me of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, baby.
Exactly.
Rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Baby, this ship is going down. It's important. Yeah.
Tomorrow, Wednesday.
Well,
No, because then I get into get stuff. So what about Tuesday morning volunteer?
Don't volunteer for that.
Actually, we're
And I said, well, it's fine, but
she's.
Okay.
I told him
9 apples.
Oh, sure.
Can we do that?
Yes. It's gonna go from something you want to do.
You take care.
Okay.
My mom said she
Actually, it's really cute with this because it's got kind of this
Yeah.
good texture.
Yeah.
I got this.
I'm about to.
She's got just like a rose wine.
Why I thought those are all young.
It was.
Yeah. Yeah. You shook it into it?
I don't think, well, we can talk about it tomorrow, but we have to invite just a few people.
Right.
Have us monitor.
I have to.
On the boat.
Yeah.
You got all your more than I do.
I'm gonna tell them.
I know you will. Okay.
When you come in like I can.
It's all clear.
Yeah.
Where's my?
Thank you.
She's out of the country for 2 months. Hi, Nate.
Hi, Elaine.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The class that the Rev teaches on Thursday night, are y'all using the Sacred Yes?
Yes.
Did you get some books out of the bookstore or something?
I didn't personally. She might have.
I noticed a whole bunch of books missing on the shelf. Well, I just found this envelope with checks in it on the shelf.
Oh.
From, it said October 20th.
Really?
And are they students? Somebody took books? Are they your students?
Oh, that's me.
You love them? Okay. Thank you. Four books of them? I sold four books of them. Yeah. I was going to give them my, take my stash. I just got to look at all kinds of things. I want to show.
Oh, great. We've been recording all this time.